So this is hand planes, okay? This is a traditional shop on hand planes and how to use hand planes properly, how to care for hand planes, and really apply them to various species of woods. Rule of thumb is the harder, more dense the wood, the more difficult it is to use a hand plane just because it's breaking the wood off, and the wood, its cellulose, its structure is very tight. So more fibrous wood, like this sample of Moranti, is very light. It's like cedar, so it's going to be easier to craft. So hand planes usually are used, and traditionally were used for floors for a lot of older woodworking, which before power tools you would have to use your hands, hence the plane. And what it does, it planes off the surface of the wood. So you now have, instead of a sander, what we do now, you have a hand plane that has these blades inside and a device to hold everything and chip out the wood. So really how it's built, I can show you the structure of it. Some of the older ones, you have Stanley Bailey, then Stanley Sweetheart, that's a newer version. You have this, which is called a Rabbet Plane. This cuts basically angled rabbet. So it's kind of like a shelf system. You have these things called block planes. This is for more smaller, maybe at corners you want to chamfer an edge. This is a shoulder plane. This creates similar to things like this, like a rabbet, like a shelf on a piece of wood, so you can make some kind of joinery. These are traditional hand planes. This one I made, and they're not hard to make. And the blades kind of get stuck in there, but basically, this is a modern one I made. This is a very old smoothing plane. These are made to do really kind of anything, but basically smoothing. You're getting the surface of the wood, and you're smoothing out the top, so it's not, fibrous, so it's very smooth. You can then apply a lacquer or whatnot. The structure of a hand plane, besides the body of it, involves a blade. This is a very, very sharp blade. I use diamond stones when I sharpen mine, or water stones, or both actually. And this is by Hawk. They're still made today. And this is what's called your chipper, or your breaker. And this should be slightly offset from the blade. And what this is used for is, when you're cutting a piece of wood with a plane, you're cutting out like this downward angle, right? And this blade is shaving off pieces of wood. Now, if there's no breaker in it, the breaker acts as like a curl. It helps the wood curl out of the way. Otherwise, the plane would keep digging and chattering into the wood. So with these, of course, this isn't the first one I made, so there's some imperfections to it. But traditionally, one that's made with a chipper and a breaker, or the blade and the chipper, you have a wedge in it that holds it in place. So if you want more of the plane to protrude in the bottom, you simply tap it with a hammer. Hit the wedge in place. If you want it to go out, you hit the back of it. And it just makes it come out more. Not that I'm exaggerating, but so, and never treat your planes like that. You want to place them on the side so the blades aren't really touching a lot of metal. I kind of keep them tucked up like that, or just take them apart. So from the largest end here, we have a Stanley. This is a number 6. This is made for flooring, basically. Old wood flooring you get on your hands and knees. This is called a jack plane. Now, it's corrugated on the bottom, so you have these long cuts in it. That's to remove weight, to relieve the weight, because it's a very tiring profession, constantly doing this. I mean, I'm sweating just holding this, doing it. But that also relieves heat. So when you're doing this so much to a piece of wood, just like a table saw, you kind of wedge it too hard and it causes like a scarring on it. That's the heat. You're caramelizing the wood, basically. You're cooking it. So this reduces that, but it also just makes it easier to work. These are great for smoothing large items. Typically you can just cut straight onto something. You always want to cut with the grain, okay? And I'll be easier to set up here and show you. You always want to secure your piece of wood. You're going to tighten it. I like vices. These are called bench dogs. Basically hold them in that way. So for something this wide, I wouldn't use this. I would probably use like a number 4. But for this application, if you just hit it head on, it's going to cut. And you want to move with it. So you don't want to really just sit there and do this, because it's going to wobble. And you're creating an angle, okay? And you can lean into it incorrectly, and it's going to create an angle, and then you're going to be offset. If you turn the blade this way and go forward, that's going to decrease the angle of the blade, which is going to make a shallower cut. That's going to make it basically a smoothing plane. Okay, that's like kind of what these are called. These are like low-angled smoothing planes. They're very low, the blade, you can see, as compared to, I don't the height of this blade. So this is an aggressive attack on that blade. This is a very low angle blade. You also have to sharpen it differently. So if I just merely turn the blade, that offsets it and creates an easier cut. You know? And with that, I think it makes a smoother cut. And you can see, you know, I'm having my body go with it, and it's, you know, it's nice. It's nice and smooth, and basically you just made a proper angle. Now, to check your work, I like to use machinist squares. This is a certified 90-degree angle. So as long as your top of the wood is planed, I'm assuming this is, this now should be really a 90-degree angle. So if I was doing that improperly and cutting it at an angle, it would show right here. So this is just another way to check your wood. Okay. Again, this is ash. This is, you know, used for a lot of different applications, baseball bats. But it's a beautiful piece of furniture wood too. And it's not that dense. It's pretty dense, not that dense. So, say again? Oh no.
Actually, I have a question about
yeah, question.
It looks like you naturally went down, I would call it downhill with the grain. There's one direction that's better to use, right?
So, you mean cutting with the grain?
Yeah.
So typically, yeah, grain, if you think about it like grass, I love my lawn, I love my lawnmower, and grass grows in a certain direction, depending on the sun and whatnot. So if you cut across the grass, you see like on golf courses that checker pattern. Well, it's just gonna be easier cutting with this, right? This is the natural growth of the tree. You know, this is probably a quarter sawn piece of wood. You can tell it by the angles of the age of it, the rings. And if you were to cut against it, I mean, I'll show you what it does actually. You can do it right here. Take this number 4, and just kind of roll it. It's very nasty. And it really scars the wood. That's all it does. Just scarring the wood. Come out. And it makes it almost impossible to do it. So you could use a hand plane this way, but if you look at like how these come out, it's not helpful for the wood as opposed to cutting this way. These come out like you see in more curls. So it's just relieving the wood, it's cutting it off properly as opposed to going across the grain. Now, certain woods like maple, which I don't have a copy of, wood has these fibrous pores, and maple, especially curly maple, it has all this figure in it. And it's the way the growth ring, the way the tree grows, basically around knots. The knots in the tree make the curls in it, or the crotch of the tree when it branches off. So when you're going to have to hand planer or put it in a planer, when those curls come to the surface, they move left and right, up and down. They move all sorts of different directions instead of the true direction of being straight. You know, nothing in nature is straight. So when you're cutting it, you're going to see what's called tear out. It's basically the growth of it, the pores being torn out in different directions. It's just something you have to learn around. There's no real easy way. So typically when I'm like showing someone how to use a plane, poplar is a great choice because look at the straight grain. This is straight grain figure. Poplar has a signature kind of white and greenish color and brown. I just noticed the poplar. There you go. That's a better example of the green. So cutting it and hand planing it's fairly easy. Again, you want to secure your piece. You could use this for it. This is a number 4. This is kind of like my go-to blade. And if I hit it head on, it's a large cut, so it looks something, you know, you can see how translucent it is. It's almost like very, very light. And that's done. That's 2 passes. I'm done with that, but I've been using this too. So now if I turn it, it's almost finer too. But it comes off, see, it's more even in the cut. This cut kind of got shallow in this one part, and this one is pretty even. And it's just me controlling the hand plane. But, you know, that's the beauty of that. Rather than putting this in a joiner, turning on a piece of machine, you now have control of your furniture or control of your tools to your own pace. You know, there's no danger to it, really. You're not going to slip your hand under it, and even if you do get your finger cut, it's going to take off a fraction. You know, it's not going to be fun, but it's a lot safer. So, modern planes do the same thing as older planes. They all have the same purpose, which is to really smooth out wood on either surface. It's made for helping joinery work properly. You know, so you get these small planes, you get shoulder planes, you get bigger planes, but the small ones are still very important. I didn't even know what this is called. I call it a finger plane because you hold it in your fingers. but the application is very common. You're just kind of removing or chamfering the edges. A lot of carpenters keep these on job sites for door jambs. You know, there's maybe an edge that sticks out, you just kind of run it by it. It gives you a lot of control. If you don't want to have to put a, you know, like a round over bit in a router, and then put the router on the table, then secure the wood to it and turn on the test vacuum, you just grab this and, you know. A lot of woodworkers get very particular about their craft and how they operate machinery, but the joy of this is anyone can just pick it up and literally put it in your pocket. So all these tools, big and small, have an application. Does anyone know the name of this? Is it finger plane? Is that what you call it? No? Okay.
Sounds good to me.
Finger plane. So we went over kind of various planes here. This is still a very good plane, even though it's pretty old. I'll try to give it a couple passes. See what it looks like. So again, you want to secure it with your wedge. Kind of give it a test to see where it's at. Oh, it's there, right? So that was very difficult. This is pretty deep down, so I want to loosen it. I want the blade to come back out, so I'm going to tap it. A lot easier. So now that's uneven though, because this is also pretty wild. It's pretty squirrely to handle. And it's really made to smooth, flatter pieces of wood, like maybe a tabletop, you know, certain parts of it. You know, I don't have to move every time with my body, the motion. You're going to get comfortable and find your own motion. But for me, you know, I prefer that. Now this one works head on. I don't have to turn the angle of it. If I move head on and ride the direction with it, it's going to cut off a pretty good piece of, you know. And this blade's over 100 years old. I just sharpened it properly. When you sharpen things properly, no matter the age, it's going to work out really well. You know, there's really no way to hold these. Just have a secure grip. You know, you're just going with it. And that's cutting like butter, actually. And the cool thing with these, you can make them, like I did with that one. Well, that's not working well. And that's very gratifying. You know, you're making a tool to make other tools to make furniture. So, check the different angles, the blades. Now, proper care for a blade. I'm going to leave this here. I'll show you how to sharpen them. Now, if I'm going too fast, slow me down. There's two kinds of stones and oils. There's really, well, there's two oils. There's oil and then there's water. I like water when you sharpen a blade. I'm going to sharpen, not my good blades, but, you know, what the hell can I sharpen? I'll sharpen this guy, it's a good one. This is your, I don't know, hold down. Chipper and the blade. They're back to back. These Stanleys, most blades are traditionally made. They're screw-on together like this. They hold in place. And remember, when you have the blade, the breaker or the chipper should go right like a fraction underneath it because you need a little bit of space. The more space you have like that, the more your wood's going to kind of just go wild. You have less control over it. So when you have it closer to the edge, it's going to create a finer curl. It's basically curling the wood out to make it easier to cut. So, many ways to sharpen a blade. One of which is using a jig. Now, jigs are pretty straightforward. You can make them, or you can buy them. This is a Veritas, I think. I forget what. But this says chisels and blades. Okay. Now, you would have to find an angle. Most blades are, it says here, 40 degrees. No, a 25-degree angle, or a 30-degree angle. That's about it. The bigger ones like this is a 20-degree or 25-degree. That goes a lot further down. I'm not quite sure what that is. But instead of using this, what I tend to do is I find the angle with my fingers. And how you do that is you lay the blade flat so the offset is up. And you're going to tilt it till it roughly stops. Now this is a pretty low angle blade, so it's kind of hard to feel, but mostly it's going to be about 35 or 40. And once I feel comfortable with it, that's when I'm going to start cutting. Now, I like water, so I'm going to put water on it. These stones have two sides. One side is more coarse than the other. This is pretty sharp, so I'm going to make sure I do it on the finer coarseness. And I'm basically going to do it like an angle. So if I were to sharpen it this way, if you can see, the other blade's going to be exposed and it's going to be offset. So you're going to have like basically a gouge in it. So what I do is I turn it like this, just like I would in my plane when I'm working it. And I want to find what's probably a safe angle for me. I'm putting my two fingers as support. I'm holding it as such with my middle finger or my ring finger at the corner. I'm just pushing off. and you get comfortable with this motion, and you're going to see some kind of like a residue come off. It's normal. Now this is not an India stone, this is a Japanese sharpening stone. Sometimes the stones need to be flat themselves. And mind you, if I was offset on the angle, if it wasn't the proper angle I wanted, it's okay because this is such a fine grain, it's not going to matter much. Now with one side, you do have to sharpen the other side. Then you want to flip it over to flatten it. And you want to do equal amounts. So let's say you do 5 passes one way, you do 5 passes the other way. And what this does, it decreases the chance of a burr. The burr is going to overhang it. You don't want that. Not on a hand plane. On a scraper, you would like a burr, but not on a hand plane. So you want to angle it to your comfort, to your feel. Let's say 1, 2, 3. Looks good. And then just do a couple passes. And that's about ready to use. And you can see the pattern I always have here, because I like to approach it at those angles. Now this is a smaller size stone. You could get a diamond stone, which I use water with as well. And it's not made of diamond, but it's basically very well-treated steel with some kind of diamond flakes on it, which help cutting it. Now typically you'd like to hold it down somehow. There's a jig I have at home, which I didn't bring, which has slots. You put it in and it holds it in place. Or honestly, you can just kind of place it against a piece of wood that's locked into place. It's not going to go anywhere. But this is okay. So this is just a finer, like very, very fine grain. And you can actually hear the imperfections still in there. I want to clean that off. And sharpening blades, again, it's not that dangerous, but you can hear too, the scraping is a lot less. This will give you what's called like a mirror finish. A very, very mirror finish. I'm not even counting this because it's not really going to create a burr on the other side unless I do many, many, many strokes. But it's the same thing. One side you do the other side. One side you do the other side. You can't have too much water and it creates almost a hydroplane, so you don't want to do that. It's hard to tell the difference with these because they're so fine, but for a truly sharp plane, they're good. See how it moves like that? So that's why you want to try to secure these in place. I could just put like a screw there and it'll stop it from moving. But you can start seeing the sharpening, or it's really polishing at this point of the blade. And any high spots or low spots are going to show on this. Now this is a very old blade. It's been treated with like, navel jelly and cleaned up for a long time, so it's harder. But typically you can feel by your finger. Just like if you feel the sharpness of a blade, it should have the same sharpness on one of these here. Again, professional woodworkers have a very good technique. Most of them do it by feel, which is like this, or you put it in a jig. And with a jig, see, I can't really angle it like that. That's why I prefer using my hands. This would have to be a larger stone. I could go straight on it. There's a little wheel right there. And if I want a lower angle, I just kind of put it further down. Higher angle, I just do that. And it does the same thing for chisels. You just put them in the middle. So this serves two purposes. I don't know who makes it, but it's a good little tool. So when you sharpen blades, that's a good way to sharpen it. Hand planes you can use on wood like I showed you, or some other woodworkers tend to use them as markers. What that means, if you want to cut a hole or just cut off some pieces, you collect hand planes for so long, you're going to have extra blades. So you can use it as a marker. You can cut pieces off, you can do some chiseling. It basically serves two purposes, which is really handy for the plane. So I'm trying to think here. What we can do now is get you guys like a hand-on practical app. I have a lot of pieces of wood here. So whatever you're comfortable with starting, I would recommend probably just the feel of it. So I would say try out this guy, try holding it, and just kind of run it over. And you get a direct readout basically. You're going to see the chippings come out and how fine they are. And if you have to slow down or go faster or contain a constant speed, okay? That's about it really. I'm trying to think. We talked about the angles. This may look like a sharpening stone, but it's not. This removes rust. This is like a little gummy pad. And it has some kind of a corrosive agent in it. So it's good for just cleaning up, something like this that might have rust on it. Use on tabletops, whatever. But one of our friends over here was cleaning his blade, and you can spray a lot of Rust-Oleum on it. You just kind of go at it, but this also just takes more elbow grease. But it's starting to work actually, look at that. So, you know, everything has a purpose. This is a good purpose. That's about it. Okay, so who wants to try them out? Anyone? So, who's used hand planes before? Anyone? Okay, so I'm just gonna basically be self-explanatory. This is a low-angle jack plane. I haven't set the blade, so I don't know where it's at, but you know, I would say just give it a shot. You're gonna stand directly over it and run it with your body. So obviously that's gonna be tilted, that's tilted, but you're gonna feel it's flat. I mean, this doesn't take much effort, you just kind of push it along. See how I like it. And usually, you want to start with the blade before it. So you're going to run, you're going to feel a hit and just keep following through. Just like a golf swing, you're going to foul through, or a baseball swing or whatever. And if you stop midway, then it's going to create unevenness, but you just pick that up again. And the key and the pride in that is it's such a low angle that if you make an imperfection, you can just go over it. And you aren't going to really see it, you know. And you can feel it too, how smooth it is. Now, some blades have what's called a, you know, like pitting, which is really rust eating away, or someone might use it on a nail. And those little marks in it are going to cause lines, or they're going to cause runs in the wood. So when you go over it, you're going to see this long line. So I think of like surfboards when you do this. I used to surf along waxing. But I mean, this right here is basically the entire length of it, roughly. And that's all you're taking off. Micro, I mean, really small amounts. And this tool should last you your entire life if you use it properly. Some of these guys, like mine, my floor jack plane, the handle broke on it because, you know, if you're going to do it like this and the blade's too deep, it's actually going to hurt your wrist and it's going to hurt your joints. It gives you carpal tunnel and whatnot. So if everything's set up properly, let the weight of the plane do the work for you. You just literally are guiding it like this. Your body is obviously going to outweigh the plane, so keep it above it like that. Keep slight pressure on the bottom. Use a head-on approach or keep it tilted, angled. With this one, see how if you angle it, it's a lot thinner than right here. But now I don't have much control over it. Right about there, I kind of riveted it off for go head-on. And you can feel it too. You can feel right there it stops. That's where I'm going to be cutting. So if I keep, you know, yeah, feel free. I'm going to set up the rabbet plane because this is a very interesting bit. Or shoulder plane. This is the shoulder plane, and they do the same purpose, except this is controlled. So if I just wanted to cut maybe a 1/4-inch rabbet, so like a drawer runner, or to make like a typical box, you would have these offset grips. And this helps do it. Setting this is kind of difficult. And these are all good tools. Not that friendly on the joint. So you can see how much this is taken off, and it's a lot. So I want to reduce it. And you reduce it by these levers. These older tools have a lot of functionality, which is good and bad. It's kind of difficult, actually. Bring it up just a little. You just have more control in the newer tools, which is a nice thing. That's what I'm cutting right now. So I would just basically move my lever down until I'm ready to cut. Straight up. It's not what I want it to look like, but that's the idea. But if I want to only take a 1/2 inch off at a certain depth, this is the way to do it. And this is my stopper for it too. So everything's going to curl out of there. And then just quick work in no time. Now, of course, you want to check the angle. Because if your angle's off, then it's not going to be a good joint. Now, these do heat up a lot and they tend to get clogged. So you want to make sure they're not getting clogged. So typically you can put a couple blades in a table saw and make a Dado blade, which is stacked blades. That would do the same thing. But that's a lot of pain in the ass work, okay? This is easy. Depends what your definition of easy is. So basically, this is what I did. I made a nice groove. Drawers typically have this. Any box joiner that's going to butt against each other will have this. And of course, you can check your results with a square. from there, onward, whatnot. But typically that's how you do it. It does a good job. If you want to cut further and more precise, you take the shoulder plane, which rides against the shoulder of an object. So I'll put it on this side so you can see it. Shoulder plane. Just kind of fits right in there. Very fine cuts. Very beautiful cuts too. This cuts like butter, but this is a brand new shoulder plane. But it's been well taken care of because it's in a cabinet that says so. You can see how it punches up like that, but very, very fine cuts as opposed to the rigid leather cuts like this. So, yeah, feel free if you want to come up. They're not hard to use. They're very safe, very easy to use. Most of these are set up so you can just kind of pick it up and go with it. Again, not a lot of control with the block plane, but does a fine job. Cut chamfers with it. Most woodworkers typically have like a number 4, which is this guy, a low angle block plane, and a shoulder plane. This will do a lot of work for you. Okay, a lot of work. Now, if you don't have a marker, let's say you want to make that, but you don't have a rabbet plane or a shoulder plane. What you do is usually take a marking gauge, which I have out here, and you basically mark the wood, and that's going to cut a small groove. And these shoulder planes are so fine that when you ride them on the wood, it's going to find that groove and kind of cut for you, which is good. You typically hold them like that. But you know, box joints, jewelry boxes, you tend to do this a lot. All right, well, enough of me talking. You guys want to try them?
Would you attempt to do that across end grain, like if you're doing a box?
Oh, end grain, not with the shoulder plane. So I might have misunderstood you earlier. End grain is very important. Long grain, end grain. End grain is hard to cut for a lot of reasons. I'm glad you brought that up, and I'll show you how to do it. It's a good piece of ash. So you can see here, this is a quarter sawn cut. Flat sawn cut is basically just long flat pieces of wood. It would be like this. Okay, imagine a tree trunk like this. Then you have the quarter cuts like this. Basically you take a flat, quarter it, it's right there. Rift cut is even more of an angle. But to cut end grain, typically like cutting boards or butcher blocks have end grain because when you're chopping on them with a blade, it's like cutting into grass blades. Okay, you're not chopping the grain in half. If you were to chop this way on a cutting board, it's still going to work, but the grains are going to be destroyed. They're going to be cut in half, and over time, you're going to make cuts there and there and there, and they're just going to fall out over long periods of time. Okay. So when you cut this way, just like a blade of grass, it's going to cut into the wood, but it's going to sustain structure over time a lot longer. Now, to get that flat, it's difficult. Typically, you can use any of these, but it's recommended that you use a very low angle plane to do this. Now you have to understand, I talked about that, what do you call that thing with maple, when the maple gets ripped up, tear out. Same thing happens on the edges. It's called blowout. So I'll just kind of go across this once. You heard it too, and I already chipped it. That's called blowout because I'm not doing it right, but it's hard. I don't like doing this stuff. Not with end grain. But you can see how it tore it off on the side because there's nothing supporting it out there. Whereas this, it's just running off like a water slide, you know, just like a waterfall. You can just run off of here with a hand plane, you know, and nothing's going to hurt it. Whereas if you go this direction, it's naturally going to want to go down like that. So typically what people do is, if you make a through tenon, like on a table leg, piece of wood that's cut to go on another piece of wood, and the end's going to protrude out, you want to keep it cleaned up. So people will kind of chamfer the ends of it. You can do it that way. Again, it's cutting on the side. See that blowout? That's more blowout right there. So you got to really kind of make every side 45-degree angle. You can do it with my little finger plane. Not really, because so when you do this nice little angle, and then kind of cut across here. So when I cut this now on the top, these bevels are there, so it's not going to cause any of that blowout to happen now. That's usually how people do that. You can do it with like dovetails or box tail joinery, box joints. But yeah, for that kind of stuff, it's difficult. I tend never to use hand planes on this. I really use planers, but it's tough on the planer too. You want to go at a slower speed so you don't rush it through. There it goes. See, it's a sensitive thing. Now this is ash. This is a pretty dense wood. If I were to do it on Meranti or a mahogany or a cedar, it might be a little bit easier. You know. So let's try this guy again. Now squeakiness is because there's almost like air pockets because of the pores of the wood and the vibration of it. You're actually moving those grains at such a small level, it's hard to tell. It's cutting, but it's not fun. It's not. Blowout's not as significant as it was in the other one. These tools might be easier to use actually now. Yep. This just cuts a lot smoother because there's more pores in it. If you want the blade to go in, just turn the back dial a little bit. So, you know, it's not going to have a super smooth surface. I would really recommend probably a sanding block for that. It's just, you know, it's a blade going straight into the grain. So it's kind of, as opposed to doing it like this, which is very pleasurable. No sound. You know, like night and day, literally. This is a very easy wood to cut. You have a lot of control over it. You're cutting the rabbets on it. It's a lot easier. Now, one thing I haven't really talked about is the smoothing plane. I talked about the smoothing plane a little, but really, there. Can't really do that. Let's do it right here. It's good. So you have a flat surface of wood. You could smooth it out with this. It's going to take you a long time though. See? And it's kind of slow going, which is good though. You know, practices patience. So actually this might be a really good smoothing plane. But all you're doing is you're smoothing out the wood. It almost feels like you're buffing it. You can see the kind of like microfibers is taken off. The lower the angle, the easier the job it's going to be. I can still feel runs in it because this metal is so sharp on the sides that I'm actually pressing into the wood because it's so soft. Now if I get something like this, which has a nice natural wooden bottom and just a blade, barely showing, it's going to be a lot easier. It's also going to, depending how old my tool is, this could be pretty uneven too. I actually never checked that. So. It's not bad, actually. If you look at it, I'm gauging it from. It's not bad. So, let's try tapping this in a bit. So, it's doing a good job. And it's the same principle. You want to hold your, well, you want to secure your wood better than that. But typically you're holding your body over your object and moving it with your chest above it like this. If you were to do it back here, you know, you just don't have a lot of control over it. Whereas you can use your body as weight. It's the same thing when you're running the piece such as like that. And these get clogged up a lot, you can tell. Actually, spoke shave helps with making corners, rounding angles. So this is your Stanley supplement. Spoke shave, flat spoke shave, it's pretty flat. Is there a blade in there? And you're going to basically tune it down with these little guys until it comes out. You can see it kind of shooting out the bottom. Don't stick it out too much. And you always do this pulling towards your body. You just want the blade to shoot out till you're comfortable with the feel of it. You tighten down your piece. It's kind of like your chipper. And it's very, very ergonomic. It kind of fits the mold of your hand. I'm just going to pull it. So instead of putting this in a router, I can now kind of create any kind of angle right here. So right there, it's doing that because I try to use a rabbet on it and I'm hitting like a shelf. I shouldn't chatter. It's called chatter. And the grain of the wood might be affecting that. So depending on the flow of the grain, you want to find what side is going to be the smoothest. And actually, it's neither. It's being built up. So see, it's clogged with wood right now. So I might have had too big a cut. So I take the whole blade out. And a lot of this stuff is just trial and error. You're going to find what works, what doesn't work. That filled up pretty quickly. It's a brand new blade, so see how that goes again. I'm going to try to make less of a blade. But these are really just to smooth your corners, okay? You're not doing anything crazy with them. And it tends to curl and wrap around each other. I don't know why they call it spoke, but it definitely shapes the wood. Put your thumbs there and hold it. And this is really good because you get a feel for what you're cutting. You can feel it with your hand. And if you want a proper angle, what you would do is then trace in something here. So you'd have like a marker. I want an exact, maybe a pyramid shape, or I want a round over. So I would just cut until that meets the guide. You know, that meets my marking. Typically people who make like staffs, walking sticks, or bows, anything of that sort, tend to use a lot of these. They also use draw knives, which we have here. So just you know, keeping attention that it doesn't curl into each other and cause that blockade you saw. And believe it or not, this makes very good kindling and packaging. You know, if you were just to get a bunch of these and go, happy birthday. You know, it looks well and it does good for packaging. I use a lot of campfires. Now, if you had a thinner piece of wood, you can use this other tool I was going to show you. This is called something. I forget the name of it, but they're an older tool in the hand plane family. And this cuts your angles really well. It rounds it over almost immediately. Got a round over. It's a perfect angle. It's smooth enough where you don't have to overkill it, and it's even. So you hear how it was rough going that way? Probably because the grain structure is a little different. This is a 45-degree angle, just like a corner. So you literally sit it like it would be a corner and just cut. It only cuts to a certain depth because it rounds it over. Anything that's not, you know, rounded, it's going to catch and round it out for you. It's a great tool. Using it for centuries. And the scraper. So, scraper is this stuff. Basically, scraper, people who make like molds or a crown molding for houses, traditionally you'd have scrapers. So this fits in that kind of curvature like a Roman ogive or an ogive mold. And you would ride that groove in here depending on the size of it. And basically it's a flat piece of sheet metal that has a burr protruding on one side. So instead of pushing it to the cutting it, you're scraping it. You're pulling back any grains at a very, very small rate. And it does a good job, honestly. You have a drawing, so we'll do that later. You can just feel on it, whereas both sides typically have it. Or really one side does. So this side's kind of smooth, so the burr's over here. So typically you want to get it pressed down at an angle. Some people pull in the sides, but you know, it's such a small amount. It's almost like just dust. Now this is pretty smooth already. You can see the dust coming off it. And these do heat up quickly, so you're gonna feel them get pretty hot. Because it's so friction, it's such a quick rate, so much friction. So that was a good example. But this is pulling off probably the final stages. Some people who do a lot of lacquering, such as using shellacs, there's a technique called French polishing, where you're literally rubbing on the shellac. It's drying quickly with the vapor, and to finish that off, instead of buffing it or sanding it, people get a scraper, and they will pull against it. And that cleans up any kind of residue left in the process. Excuse me. Now, this also helps with cutting the flatter surfaces, such as this.
I've heard of it being used for compactors.
Yeah, you can definitely do that. Never thought of that. And you find the kind of, now this is pretty rough already, so I wouldn't really try it with this, but typically, so you can see the kind of work it would have to do. It's really cutting into it. It's not that good for it. So, you typically kind of clean that up, and I'm getting the high spots away already. See how I did that? Even I make mistakes. So I got it pretty cleaned up. That's pretty good. You can get your spoke shave. I'm just going to apply it. That's a pretty wide surface, so it's going to really take some time. Try the other side. There we go. It's almost like dust. Now I'm going at this pretty aggressively just to show you. If you're going to apply this with any kind of a varnish or lacquer, you wouldn't hit that hard. You would go very light, almost like that, like one time. And this is just micro shaves. So you can see, you can even feel it. If it's really rough, that means you're doing it too rough. And there's still high spots, so if you go at a good pace, yeah, it does a good job. These are pretty impressive. So this is the old way of sandpaper. Now, some moldings have grooves in it, which is why you use this. You literally are going to find the burr and just kind of either make it, or it's going to be pre-made for you. I'm just going to cut into it. Same thing with this. It's kind of like a nice bend to it. I've honestly, in all my applications, I don't use these. This is just very slight. Oh, messing me with this. Water everywhere. The good thing about using oil compared to water is oil doesn't hurt your tools. So typically with water, I want very dry, and I put like a nice thin layer of wax on it. Johnson's paste wax is great. I use it for my tabletops and my saws, all my other equipment, and this too. Same thing with the blade. You want to wax the blade because it's steel, so it's going to get corrupt, some kind of oils. Even that has some kind of like a red tarnish on it. And just like how I showed you caring for it, this little block. It's like, imagine like a big eraser just with grit. And that's all that does. And that literally just took it away. Now that was probably just from moisture for being in there, not from people touching it because they haven't really been used. So that cleaned up pretty well. To preserve that, I would probably spray it with acetone. See the markings? Acetone to clean it, and then put a nice layer of wax on it. And I want to hit the blade because I won't leave the blade the way it is. So hand planes, they're a good tool. I mean, you really don't need many tools except for kind of a mallet when you're operating with hand tools. or hand planes, I should say, because this is going to help with the older ones mainly, tapping in your knife or your blade, getting it back out. In, out, in. Or using this as a marker, or even cutting off edges. You know, if you have a box lid that's not fitting flush in, you might be able to just kind of do a couple one of these. It's a great blade. It's going to last forever. So, or even, I want to do this. But that works pretty good. Draw knife. A true bow maker uses a draw knife. And this just removes a lot of wood very quickly. Very quickly. Blade there. You don't want to dig too deep of angle because it's going to be impossible. So this is not going to work. So this is like my, kind of like my round over, but very sharp angle with less control. So you see how much wood it removes, how quickly. So people who make like, so I just made a pretty good groove. So if you make rocking chairs, this is the old tool to do it with. Or just removing a lot of wood. Very sharp tools. It takes a workout. But again, I'm really running into this. You don't have to do it that strong. Could make it just like a, what do you call it? A chamfer with it, but I wouldn't. This is a pretty big tool. It'd be a lot easier just to go like this. Well, that might be about it.